Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome to Musicianship Mastery. This is episode 101. My name is David Lane and I'm your host, and it is great to be with you once again. Now, there's a chance that you might be thinking, wait a minute, what is this? You saw this logo with my face and Musicianship Mastery with David Lane in maybe your podcast feed or on your YouTube subscription page, and you're like, I don't remember this at all. What is this? So just in case you missed it, this is the podcast that was known through episode 100 as the Musician Toolkit. And if you want to know more about what prompted that change and what kind of led to this new name and what the podcast is all about going forward, for more details, I would encourage you to go check out episode 100. For this episode 101, going forward, this is known as Musicianship Mastery. And in short, just to kind of summarize, it's pretty much the same podcast as the Musician Toolkit. But among the first 100 episodes are a lot of episodes that are a little bit broad. They talk about some topics that we're not really going to talk about here. We're not going to really talk going forward very much about music business. We're not going to talk about kind of music itself in terms of like genre celebration. Like I've had several episodes that were either about classical music, film music, a 2-part series on heavy metal, one episode that was all about my favorite jazz albums. And those were fun episodes, along with a few other types that I'm just not going to really delve into, either much at all or at all going forward. I wanted to start afresh with the idea is very simple. It's as simple as the two words in this podcast's title, and that is Musicianship Mastery. And hopefully the description at the very beginning of this episode will make it clear. But because this is the first episode under this title, the renewed focus is to help you grow in your musicianship. And it doesn't matter if you are already a professional musician, you're an aspiring professional, or you don't have any plans to become a professional musician. You just want to be good at it, even while you're doing other things to make a living. You want to come home in the evening and you want to pick up your instrument, and you want to know that you're not failing to meet your potential, but you're taking steps to grow your musicianship. There's a lot of things that go into that. And that was kind of the original premise of this podcast, as I identified eventually 21 tools of musicianship that if you will focus on improving even a little bit each one, you could become an excellent, well-rounded musician. But I thought there was too much focus on the tools and not enough on what is the actual point, and that is you becoming a better musician. So just a few more things before I get into the main topic today, and that's just to say welcome or welcome back. If you're starting here from scratch, I'm going to do my best to make sure that there's really nothing that you've missed out on that I think is crucial for the renewed theme of this podcast. And if you've been with me since the very beginning, since episode 1, welcome back, and thank you for continuing to listen to this or watch this if you're finding this on YouTube. Just in case you missed episode 100, and frankly, just in case you forgot, it has been a while since that came out. I did take a little bit of a break, nearly 2-month break after episode 100 before this episode. One of the things that is also different, and I have mixed feelings about this aspect of it, but when I decided if I was going to go forward with this podcast, if I was going to continue, if I was going to do what I think needs to be done for what I can offer as a host for this type of podcast, besides renewing the focus, I also needed to take into context my overall schedule, which is as someone, at least as of this episode, I am all by myself. I do not have an assistant of any kind, and I have so many other fires going at any one time. I'm a music director for a local church. I have a full roster of students that I teach piano and composition to. I have a YouTube channel. I am regularly using my studio to record projects for various organizations, as well as composing and arranging. And every guru, every expert out there will tell you that if you start a podcast, if you start a YouTube channel, you need to be consistent. You need to strive for about once a week. And I'm really proud that I did that for 100 weeks, really for 99 weeks. There was a 1 week that we had 2 episodes in, but I did not miss a week to get from episode 1 to 100. That was a commitment I made when I started, and I'm proud of myself for making it that far. And I think if I had an assistant, or if I had fewer interests, I would be more than willing to just keep this going all the way to episode 200. But I have to be realistic that I want to focus on quality, not quantity. If I tried to keep going with 1 episode per week, I was really going to cut corners. And I don't just mean on length, because I think some of these episodes are still going to be kind of short, but in terms of actual something to talk about, something that I think would be helpful to you. And I'll go ahead and say that anything that I share with you, I'm also talking to myself as reminders for me. I present myself as someone with a good bit of education and quite a bit of experience, but that doesn't make me a master of anything. And there's bound to be things that I will suggest to you. And when you think about your own situation, you might say, this just doesn't work for me. And I more than respect that. If any advice that I offer, or any guests that I have a conversation with, anything that they offer, if it helps you, that's wonderful. But I understand it might not always help you. It might not help everyone who's listening. So that was a long way of saying this podcast will not be on a regular schedule, other than when it comes out, it'll come out on a Monday. Usually at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, depending on what time of year it is. So I guess depending on where you live, it might be coming out on Sunday evening. But my expectation is that at a minimum, I will give you 1 new episode per month, and time permitting, I'll do 2. It's not out of the question. There might be a month where I'll do 3. But it's almost certain that I am not going to give you an episode every week. I'll go ahead and tell you now, I do not have an episode planned for next week. But I just wanted to set that expectation for now. I will be more active with what I post about the podcast on my social media before the episode comes out, not just when and after it comes out. And if you're not following me already, you can follow me on Facebook at David M. Lane Music. You can follow me on Instagram at David Lane Music. I'm also on Threads under that same handle, David Lane Music, and TikTok, David Lane Music. So this is the first episode of 2025. So Happy New Year. I hope you have goals that inspire you, that will help you to become a way better musician by the end of 2025 than at the beginning. And so the title of this episode, to kind of help you, and again to help me, I'm hearing myself give myself a pep talk as well. Something that's been on my mind over the past month or so is something that I found has been helpful, and I kind of walked into it accidentally. This idea that I needed to stop dabbling in certain things, and it's time to get serious. So I believe that's the episode title, Time to Get Serious. When it comes to practice, when it comes to practicing music, whether it's technique or repertoire, or when it comes to composing, when it comes to sitting down and creating music, whether that be directly into your computer or writing it out by hand or typing it into your notation program, however you choose to do that. Whatever it is that you're doing, to build something musically. I think we need to talk about what kind of cost you have to put in to make real progress. This episode is inspired by my recent forays, I'm not sure if that's the word I want, my recent experiences with the app Duolingo. I don't know off the top of my head how long my Duolingo streak is in terms of days. I know that it says on my little profile on the little competitive leaderboard of the league that I'm in 5+ years. So it's been over 5 years since I missed a day on Duolingo. But the great majority of those 5+ years has been me working on a little bit of French, actually very little French, because I was brand new to French when I started Duolingo, and but mostly Spanish, because I did have 3 years of Spanish in high school, and then I didn't use it at all for probably about 20 years, and then decided I think I need to relearn what I did and try to build on that. And I don't think it took me very long to get back to where I was. But my overall practice has been probably on average, I might spend on an average day about 5, maybe 10 minutes on Spanish, and probably about half that on French. Now, that is for really studying. These competitive leagues, sometimes it's easy to go and do these things that increase your experience points, your XP, and I don't think that it's really helping you learn anything. It's just like it's the same things over and over, like just matching and not necessarily learning new words, but just kind of reviewing old things. And what I have found over these years is that the comfort level that I had with Spanish, and I'll just say as of November 2024, was marginally better, if better at all, than it was in, say, November 2021. It's about a 3-year period. I've gone over a lot of new things. I've been introduced to a lot of grammar, vocabulary, and again, I'm just focusing on Spanish at the moment. But my comfort level, again, not really any difference. I would say if there's a difference, it's immeasurable. But my comfort level in January 2025 compared to November 2024, a time of 2 months, I'm a lot more comfortable now. And I'm going to tell you what the biggest difference was. I stopped dabbling and I started to get serious. I carved out not a 15-minute time, but a 45-minute time in the morning, just for Spanish. And unless I have a particularly busy day, I do that every morning. I think there's been maybe 2 days since mid-November that I wasn't able to give it at least a strong 40 minutes. And sometimes I'm able to do that more. I'm able to go like 50 minutes, not quite an hour, but usually somewhere averaging about 45 minutes per morning on Spanish. And I find that, and I'm going to get into detail about what I'm discovering, but overall, it's not just a difference between like 5 and 10 versus 45. It's not just that 4 times difference. There's an exponential component going on here. So I want to tell you a few things that I noticed, and then I want to apply this to some specific ideas that you can take for practicing your instrument or as a composer. So the first thing I notice is that it takes about, on average, 15 minutes, maybe 10 sometimes, but if I take 45 minutes to study on Duolingo, on Spanish, it takes me a good 15 minutes before I start to feel like I'm getting in the flow, like I'm warming up, I'm getting into it. And then, as I continue going, so Duolingo is actually a pretty good app. I would agree with the critics that it's not enough to really learn a language. You need to have some sort of immersion. You need to actually practice speaking to people who speak the language. You need to read books in that language. There's a lot of things you have to do. Again, if you want to get really serious, and I am trying to do this because I would love to say habla español on my website and wherever I advertise my services. I would love to be able to do that. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that at any point in 2025, but I bet if I work hard enough in 2025, I might be brave enough to do it this time in 2026. But I'm going to have to get serious. I'm going to have to stop dabbling. So I don't know if this is something that's going to work year round or if I need to up my intensity even more. But the thing that I do like about Duolingo that I found is helpful is in 45 minutes, I can get through probably anywhere between 8 to 10 lessons. And I start to notice, hey, this is, especially when I do it several days in a row, I get to maybe day 3 and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember having trouble with this 2 days ago. And now I'm starting to get it. And it's that repetition day after day after day, but also getting into the flow, getting the brain kind of acclimated to working on this task, and then doing more and more and more with it. And your brain keeps getting that information over and over, and you start to grasp it. And then you compound that by doing it day after day. And that really helps. So the other thing, and I know that this is going to really apply on practice. And I think we're going to switch over to talking about practice now because it is the same in Duolingo, but I want to go ahead and let's talk about working on a technique. We'll talk about working on a scale. So I want to give you a scenario. This is a realistic scenario. So I have this issue as a teacher that I want to be encouraging, but at the same time, I kind of understand the realities of what that is. A great many of my students are adults. Some of them are retirees, but a lot of them are working adults with a full-time job. And their backstory is they either didn't take lessons as a kid and they wanted to, or they did take a few lessons and they didn't appreciate it at the time. And now that they have their own income, they're able to support their own project, they're able to start over as a beginner and learn the piano. And that I love that type of student. But what I find mostly with working adults is that there's some weeks where they're telling me it's just very hard to find any time to practice. And that on a typical week, it's really, they're pretty lucky if they can get in 20 or 30 minutes. And probably most times it's like 10 or 15 minutes they're going to sit down and practice. And I will tell them this, and I'm not just saying this to be comforting because it is absolutely true. I tell them 10 minutes is better than no minutes. In fact, 10 minutes is better than 5 minutes. 5 minutes is better than no minutes. And that's absolutely true. But I want to give you a specific type of thing. So a lot of them will get to the point to where we're learning a 1-octave scale, hands separately, or maybe even hands together. And later on, that can become a 2-octave scale with one hand and then hands together. But let's just say we'll take a 1-octave scale, hands together. We will work on that in the lesson. We'll get introduced. I will see that they're able to do it correctly. And of course, because it's new, it'll be very slow. They'll be thinking very hard about it. But for the sake of keeping things interesting and for the sake of going on, the last thing I will say to them is understanding that they are busy. Try to take about 5 minutes a week to work on this and to continue getting better. So if they do that, and I don't know that they always do, because it takes a lot of work to keep coming back to the fundamentals. It takes a lot of reminding. But if you take, let's just say, a C major scale, 1 octave, hands together, and you're working on being very careful, and you spend that time 5 minutes, and let's just say that you're trying to get 5 good repetitions, and you do that one day in a week, and then you kind of put it away, and then you do that again the next week. All right, let's fast forward 40 weeks from now. So we're sometime in the fall. We started this in January. We're sometime in, I didn't figure out exactly, probably around September, maybe October. And if we've stayed true, if we haven't missed any weeks, if we've worked to get 5 good repetitions on a scale once a week, by the time we get to the fall, we have done it 200 times. We've gotten 200 reps on that scale, and we've done enough so that our body should start finally getting into the groove of that, and it's getting better and better and better. Sorry, before I go on, I have to say that that's a fantasy. Sorry, it's time for some hard truth. If you practice 5 repetitions of a scale once a week, and you continue to do that once a week for 40 weeks, you will get 200 repetitions in. But you're probably going to still be super conscious about playing that scale, and it's not going to feel a lot more comfortable than it did the first week. And if you are a student, if you are an adult student and you've been in the situation, you know that this is true. Now, I think I might be, in a lot of cases, pretty optimistic that you're getting 5 good repetitions of a scale in a week that you're trying to improve or to even maintain. It might be once or twice, but let's be optimistic again. Let's say twice. So to get to 200 repetitions, you've got to stick with this for 2 years. You've got to get 100 weeks in. And I promise you, if you're only getting in 2 repetitions in, you're not going to feel any further along. And that is because effort diluted by time has an exponentially negative effect on the quality of learning and the efficiency. See, if you're spending 5 minutes on something once a week, the thought is, I'm learning a little bit each week. I'm going to get a little bit better. And if I keep doing this each week, I'm going to get better and better. It's just going to be very small progress. It's going to be hard to notice from week to week, but I'll certainly notice it from, if not from month to month, from season to season, from quarter to quarter. I'm going to be noticing real progress. But that is a myth. The fact is, if you're going 6 days without doing anything and you're only spending 5 minutes at most working on a skill 1 day a week, remember, it takes time to even get into the flow, and 5 minutes usually isn't enough time. So what you're really experiencing is the effect of being on an escalator, where you're stepping slow enough that you're kind of staying on the same spot. It's like you take one step up, that step that you moved up to slides back down. You take another step up, that new step slides right back down. So if you want to make progress, you've got to go up the escalator faster than it's moving. And I just realized as I'm saying this, that's if you're trying to go up an escalator that's going the other way. So yeah, we should probably establish that. It's almost more like, I guess a better example is a treadmill. If you go fast enough on a treadmill, you'll move forward if it's not going too fast. But you have to go a certain speed to stay put. What happens if you just stand there? You just fall right off. And this is the other myth of practice that we have to talk about. The myth would say, if you don't practice, the worst thing is that you're not going to make progress. But the reality is, if you don't practice, you're going to fall off the treadmill. You're going to forget what you know. And if you don't forget it mentally, your body is going to forget it. Regression happens when you're not practicing. So if you practice once a week and you practice for 5 minutes on a certain thing, well, it's 167 hours and 55 minutes that you're not practicing. And while you're not doing that, the treadmill of music efficiency is just dumping you right off onto the floor. And so when you come back to practice 5 minutes the next week, you're basically stepping on the treadmill and keeping your balance long enough to then fall right back off again. So that minimum amount of practice is not what will give you a minimum amount of progress. It's what will keep you from regressing, from forgetting. And that has been my case with Spanish for as long as I've been on Duolingo before these past 2 months. I was able to maintain what I had done and maybe imperceptibly gain a little bit of ground, but not enough that I was aware of it and confident in it. But by changing that to 45 minutes and by making that a daily habit or a daily goal, I already had the daily habit, I had the daily streak, but by making that so much more than I'm doing in one day, I'm getting past that warm-up period for my brain to get into flow. And I'm getting the repetition from one day to the next. And I'm finally making real progress, real tangible progress to say that my knowledge of Espanol is improving pretty greatly. And I'm excited to see what that could look like over one more year of this. So let's go back to that scale. And again, I know it's hard for a lot of adults. If you are a working adult, if you're just you're treating this instrument as a passion, but you just are short on time. But here's what I really want to encourage you to do. I want you to look at your schedule and take a week and cancel some things. Reduce the amount of whatever, television or streaming you might be watching in the evening. See if there's some appointments you can get out of. See if there's something you can reduce in your life to give yourself 30 minutes that you work on this one thing that you're trying to improve. So let's just say it's the same scale, the same 1 octave hands together scale, and you devote 30 minutes to it. Well, if you stick with something long enough, at one sitting, you're going to get to where after 10, 15, 20 repetitions, it might be kind of slow and careful, your subconscious is going to start to pick up what you're doing and it's going to speed up. And in 30 minutes, we might not be talking about 30 repetitions of the scale. We might be talking about 100. What happens if you do such a session where you do 100 repetitions, good repetitions of a scale, and you do 2 days in a row? You'll get to that 200 mark that I said could take you 40 weeks or it could take you 2 years. But there's a big, big difference in what you can expect after doing 200 repetitions that are good of a technique in consecutive days. You are going to be much, much further along on that scale. You're going to actually you're going to be very comfortable with it, to the point to where now, going forward, if you committed to working on it 5 repetitions a week, well, again, you're not going to make progress from the point where you are, but you're going to be at a pretty high level. And your subconscious now has an idea of what it's doing when it didn't really have a chance to get to that place before. So you might actually improve from this point because you're taking something now that you already know pretty well, and you're just trying to keep it at a certain point and then smooth it out. And then you could then take the same technique, or sorry, no pun intended, you could take this same approach to practice and take 2 days, 30 minutes out of another week, and let's work on something else. It may be a different technique. It may be the same technique in a different key. And it may be a specific piece of music that you're working on. But the point is, you have to stop dabbling. You have to take time to get serious because it takes time, and it takes time in one sitting. So I read 89 books in 2024, and it's actually only the second time I haven't read 100 books. I don't think I'm even probably going to read more than 50 or 60 in 2025. But the point is, and you know this from past episodes if you've checked out this podcast before, I do read a lot. And I can tell you that there's something that the books that I recommend as favorites, what they have in common compared to the ones that I am reluctant to recommend. And it's not necessarily how good the book is. It is that the ones that I'm unlikely to recommend are the ones that I could not make time to sit down more than maybe 5 or 10 minutes at a time and read. Like sometimes I might wait too late to read this certain book and, I'm just tired. I'm having a hard time focusing. Or I am able to focus, but just for a short amount of time. It's hard to read a book and still be reading the same book 30 days later, unless it's truly an epic length book and feel like you're making much progress. Now, the thing is, the reason I can read a whole lot and still have books like that is that I also have a book that I'll sometimes pull out on my e-reader wherever I am, and I'm frequently listening to an audiobook. And the reason audiobooks I find very successful is I'm able to keep them going for a good bit at a time. But I've had audiobooks and I've had weeks where I'm only playing it for about 15 or 20 minutes before I'm switching to something else. And those audiobooks, regardless of how I might feel about the book itself if I was to take time with it, never make an impact because it never gets a chance to. If you want to be a good reader, you can't dabble in it. You've got to have a time where you sit down and you give it the time, I would say at least a strong 30 minutes, to really enjoy the experience. And give yourself a chance to just really focus, really pay attention. If you want to get good at your instrument, you can't dabble in it. And if you don't have time to learn everything, you need to pick something specific that you can work on for a good 30 minutes at one time, uninterrupted with concentration. And you need to do that for multiple days in a row to get to a certain level of progress where you can then decide, am I going to continue with the same thing day after day, or am I going to put that into a routine where I maintain it while I now work on something else? Because I fully believe that if you'll stop dabbling and if you'll take a couple of days a week where you really get into something 30 minutes and you focus on that one thing for that 1 week, you are going to have an amazing 2025. You're going to look back on New Year's Eve of this year. You're going to look back to where you were on New Year's Day of this same year. And you're going to say, I have grown so much. This was the year that I really took off. So let me summarize. You want to get serious. You want to stop dabbling. Pick one thing you can practice. Take 2 days in a week, consecutive if possible, and spend 30 minutes uninterrupted. Turn off your notifications when you're practicing. I would say if you can help it, get your phone out of the room. Get your phone out of the room. Don't be checking your emails. Don't be getting texts. Don't be taking phone calls. If you can tell your family, please don't disturb me during this block of time. And make that just something you do a course of a year. So I'm not even saying, this is not me saying practice every single day, because if you could practice 30 minutes, and that's not to say that that's all the time you spend at your instrument, but if you could take a 30-minute block of time every day where you focus singularly on one thing, one technique, one passage of your piece. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but if you just made that your new reality, oh my goodness, you're going to see progress. You're going to start to get it on your instrument. Now, that may not be enough. This is certainly not professional standard. If you strive to be a professional musician, you need to be hearing everything I said and just say, what, that's it? No, that's not it. You need to be doing this. And you need to be striving to find a good hour and a half or 2 hours a day, most days, that you're focusing to get to the level of where you can get something on a professional level. And the total amount of time that you're spending at your instrument, of course, does matter. I'm speaking to the person who's a beginner or the person who is just really busy and wants to make progress but just can't seem to make the time and has found that it doesn't work to dabble. And it doesn't work to dabble because dabbling keeps you making progress. Not practicing will cause you to lose what you had already learned. But practicing enough past the dabbling phase to get to where now you're getting into a flow, now you're gaining an understanding of what you're working on, that will help you to grow. So that's where I'm going to wrap up today Whether you're getting this through your podcast feed or on YouTube, if you haven't already, I would love it if you would please subscribe. And please leave a review if it is a place like Apple Podcasts, where you could leave hopefully a 5-star rating and a review. It always does help just give some credibility to someone who's looking at this podcast for the first time to see that there are kind things that have been said about it. But here's where I'm going to wrap up the podcast. If you have any thoughts you want to share, feel free to let me know at davidlanemusic.com. There's a contact form. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I'll be back with you again soon. Until then, thank you for listening.